Hello there. If you're watching this video, chances are you've reached a point in life where the noise no longer captivates you like it used to. You're beginning to seek something quieter, something deeper. A voice that doesn't overwhelm you but gently brings you back to yourself. I didn't create this series to preach or teach. I simply want to share the lessons I and many others over 50 have learned on the journey of living more truthfully, more mindfully, and more peacefully. These are lessons rooted in modern Stoic wisdom, not dry or extreme, but simple and grounded in everyday life. I hope that through each story, each moment of stillness, you'll find something meaningful for yourself. And if one day you too choose to walk in silence with steadiness and calm, remember this: you are not alone. If what I share brings you a sense of peace, feel free to hit subscribe and continue this journey with me through the lessons to come. Like a comment, even just a few words can be your way of saying I'm still here and I'm listening. Stoic lesson number 1. When you stay silent, others get uncomfortable, and that's a good sign. Hello, my friend. I want you to remember a time when you chose silence. Not because you had nothing to say, but because you no longer felt the need to justify. You no longer needed to explain. You stopped living to be understood. I recall a quiet conversation with a 58-year-old man who once told me, "I finally started to feel peace when I stopped trying to please everyone." But strangely, that's when people started to drift away. That is the paradox of growth. When you climb to a higher step, you no longer see the people who remain below. Not because you look down on them, but because you're simply not standing in the same place anymore. Your silence is not a sign of weakness. It is the clearest proof of inner strength. It unsettles others, not because you're wrong, but because you're no longer who you used to be. The truth is, people often feel more comfortable with the older version of you, the one who used to apologize, to shrink, to compromise. But that person is no longer you. One of my older students said something beautiful once. I realized I didn't grow up in their eyes. I became threatening because I became confident, clear, and harder to control. Have you ever noticed that too? The more authentic you become, the more others get uncomfortable. The quieter you grow, the louder they talk behind your back. But you don't need to respond. The Stoics taught us this thousands of years ago. You don't need to defend. You don't need to explain. You just need to stand like a mountain, unmoved by the storm around it. So when they say you've changed, gently say yes, because staying the same was no longer an option. And when the gossip spreads, remember it's their way of admitting they no longer have power over you. You don't need to fight with words. Let your life speak. Let your silence confuse them more than any defense ever could, because the truth always outlives the rumor. And peace never needs noise to prove its power. Stoic lesson number 2. You don't have to win every argument. You just have to win over yourself. Once I sat down with a 62-year-old woman who had just gone through the shock of being turned away by her own family, all because she changed. She told me, I started taking better care of myself, saying no when I needed to. I stopped nodding along out of habit. And suddenly they said I'd become selfish. Have you ever experienced that? That moment when you begin loving yourself just a little more and others say you've changed for the worse? But in truth, you didn't change for the worse. You simply stopped living to please others. It's a powerful turning point, but not an easy one. You'll be misunderstood. You'll be talked about. You'll be dragged into arguments. And sometimes you'll feel the urge to speak up to defend yourself. I understand that feeling. I've been there debating to prove my point, believing that the truth would be respected. But then I realized some people don't want the truth. They don't seek understanding. They just want someone to blame. And the Stoics taught us this. You don't need to win every argument. Win over yourself instead with peace, composure, and the power to not be pulled into chaos. Silence is not surrender. It's the refusal to participate in battles that don't deserve your energy. And sometimes, it's the strongest answer of all. A friend of mine once said, "I've learned to walk away from arguments I know I could win because I don't need to beat them. I just need not to lose myself." And the more you grow and the more you realize, not everyone deserves your story. Not every misunderstanding needs to be cleared up. Some things let time explain. Some slander let your steadiness refute. And above all, guard your heart from being dragged into things you can't control. So next time someone tries to pull you into a fight, ask yourself, am I reacting because I truly want to, or just because they expect me to? The Stoic does not react out of habit. They reflect like a still lake, seeing clearly what is truth and what is just noise. Stoic lesson number 3. Not everyone who walks with you will stay until the end. I once had a friend I'd been close with for over 20 years. I truly believed we'd grow old together. I thought some bonds were unbreakable. But then I changed, not loudly, not with drama. I simply started paying more attention to myself. I learned to say no to things that drained me. I gave less of myself away unconditionally. I stopped fearing disapproval, and I quietly began living more truthfully, and it was exactly then that I started losing people. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I stopped living the way they were used to. I no longer fit into their old expectations. One day he said to me, "You've changed. You're not as easygoing as you used to be." I stayed silent, and after that we drifted. No argument, no clear ending, just me walking toward myself and him choosing not to follow. Dear friend, I want you to understand this. Not everyone who once walked with you will make it to the end. Some people only fit older versions of you, and that doesn't mean you're wrong. Personal growth is like climbing a mountain. The higher you go, the thinner the air, and not everyone has the breath to climb with you. The Stoics accept this calmly. No bitterness, no clinging. They know what's truly meant to stay will stay. What leaves, let it like a shirt that no longer fits. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "We cannot control the actions of others. We can only control our own response." And as you grow, you'll find you no longer grieve the ones who left. Instead, you'll feel gratitude for the moments you shared, for the path you once walked together. And then, you'll move forward without bitterness, without regret. Remember this. A healthy relationship grows with you. It never demands you stay small to keep it alive. So when someone says, "You're not who you used to be," just smile. Because the opposite reaching this age and never changing that would be the real tragedy. Stoic lesson number 4. Envy doesn't come from what you have. It comes from who you dare to become, dear friend. There's something I've come to understand after over 60 years of living and after hundreds of conversations with people on the path to healing. Envy isn't always about your possessions or your achievements. What unsettles people most is your inner freedom. I once worked with a man in his late 60s, a kind, hardworking person who never harmed anyone. But the moment he started changing, eating healthier, exercising, learning to meditate, people around him began mocking him. "At your age, seriously." And I understood that sadness. When you begin becoming a better version of yourself, not everyone claps for you. Why? Because you become a mirror. Without saying a word, your presence reflects their stagnation, their resistance to change, their quiet dissatisfaction with life. And instead of looking to you for inspiration, they see you as a threat. The brighter you shine, the more they feel the shadows within themselves, and their instinct to push back. But the Stoic does not respond with anger. They don't argue. They don't feel the need to teach someone a lesson. They simply keep living in alignment like a river that doesn't stop just because a few rocks block its path. I want you to remember this. You don't have to shrink so that someone else can feel bigger. That's not kindness. That's self-erasure. You are allowed to step into your light. You are allowed to be proud of your transformation without apology. And if someone asks you, "Why have you changed?" smile and say, "Because staying the same was a slow way of losing myself." The Stoic doesn't try to please the world. They live as they are and let their silence shake the room more than any explanation could, because in the end you have nothing to prove to the world. You only need to be honest with yourself. Stoic lesson number 5. True peace doesn't need to be defended with words. I have a friend named Linda, a 67-year-old widow living alone in the quiet suburbs of Oregon. She's gentle, soft-spoken, always carrying a light smile on her face. But what I admire most about her isn't that sweetness. It's the way she stays calm in the face of judgment. Once her daughter told her that people were talking, accusing Linda of being distant, misunderstood, too silent. "Why won't you explain yourself?" "Mom, people are getting the wrong idea." Linda simply smiled and said, "If my peace needs words to defend it, then it's not real peace." I've never forgotten that sentence. It struck me like a gem of ancient wisdom because it perfectly captures the Stoic spirit. You see, we grow up in a world that teaches us silence is weakness, that if you don't explain, don't argue, you're somehow losing. But the Stoics see it differently. They don't treat words as their primary weapon. They believe in presence, calm, grounded, unshaken as the true sign of self-mastery. Have you ever met someone whose mere presence brought you peace? No need for speeches, no need to prove anything. They don't chase being understood because they already understand themselves. That's the strength of true peace. It doesn't need noise to protect itself. It doesn't need to shout or convince. It protects itself by the steadiness it radiates. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If something does not reach your mind, it has no power to hurt you." And I want you to carry that truth, especially at an age where we're more often bothered by gossip, judgment, or shallow opinions. You don't need to explain your life to those who only watch it from a distance. The more at peace you are, the less you'll need to speak. The clearer you are with yourself, the kinder you'll be to others. Let your presence be your answer. Let your silence be your loudest voice. And let your peace become a mirror in which others reflect upon their own unrest. Stoic lesson number 6. When they can't bring you down, they'll try to drag you down with words. There's something strange about this life. When you're weak, agreeable, always nodding along, people accept you easily. But when you start standing tall, saying no calmly, and living in alignment with what you believe, what happens? People start talking. And it's rarely praise. A 61-year-old man once shared with me, "I just walked away from a long-time group of friends. I realized they were only pulling me down. A week later, I heard I was arrogant, disloyal, not the same anymore. But I didn't do anything, I just stayed quiet and left." Have you ever felt that moment when you're no longer easily controlled and suddenly you become the center of whispered conversations? Here's the truth. When others can't control you, they'll try to control how others see you. They twist the story. They assign you ugly labels. But those words say nothing about who you are. They're confessions of who they are. The Stoics understood this. Gossip is a shattered mirror. It reflects the speaker's helplessness, not the essence of the one spoken about. So they don't respond with anger. They don't chase after the truth. They don't raise their voices to reclaim what's already theirs. They remain silent, but not passive. They walk away, but without bitterness. And they let their actions speak in time. I remember a line from Epictetus. "If someone speaks ill of you, and it's true, correct yourself. If it's false, smile. You owe no one an explanation. If someone is not close enough to know your heart, they're not qualified to judge your life. And if you can hold peace in your heart, While the world throws lies, that is the highest kind of victory. Remember this. The eagle doesn't lower itself to argue with crows. It rises to where crows cannot follow. So keep rising, keep walking, and let your calmness confuse them more than any defense ever could. Stoic lesson number 7. When your confidence makes others uncomfortable, know that it's not your fault. I once had a student named Jean. She was 66, a kind and gentle soul who had spent most of her life trying to make others feel comfortable. She was soft-spoken, accommodating, and often self-sacrificing just to be liked. But one day during a quiet meditation class, she turned to me and said, "I'm tired. I don't want to live to be loved anymore. I want to live to be true." And from that moment on, she began to change. She stopped apologizing for things she didn't do wrong. She stopped staying silent just to keep the peace. She stopped smiling through pain she no longer wished to ignore. And then, something strange happened. The people who once praised her for being humble now called her arrogant. The people who used to lean on her started pulling away. With confusion in her voice, she asked me, "I'm just being more honest with myself. Why are they so upset?" And this is what I told her, and what I want to tell you today. Your confidence is not the problem, but it can act like a mirror reflecting back to others the parts of themselves they've been avoiding. When you stand tall, it highlights where they're still hunched over. When you speak clearly, it reveals their own uncertainty. When you love yourself with strength and kindness, it reminds them how long they've been neglecting their own soul. The Stoics understood this deeply. They did not shrink themselves to make others comfortable. They did not mistake self-respect for arrogance. They simply chose to live honestly and let those who could accept that truth stay. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You can live rightly and still be hated. But to live wrongly just to be loved, that's the fastest way to lose your soul." You don't need to apologize for healing. You don't need to lower your voice when you finally found it. And you certainly don't need to dim your light just so someone else can stay comfortable in the dark. Your confidence is a gift, one forged through pain reflection and brave choices. If someone can't handle that, let them go. Because your peace was never meant to fit inside someone else's shadow. Stoic lesson number 8. What's the point of winning an argument if you lose yourself in the process? I still remember a late autumn afternoon sitting in my usual coffee shop where many elders often gather. There was a man named Walter, 72 years old, a former trial lawyer who once shared that he had never lost a case in court. But then he sighed and said something that made the entire table go quiet. "I won a lot, but often walked out feeling drained and hollow, because what I won wasn't what I needed." Have you ever felt like that? You won an argument with a loved one only to have the meal go silent and cold. You clapped back at an insult only to feel exhausted the whole day. You proved you were right only to feel more alone than ever. The Stoics never traded their inner calm for a moment of victory. They chose to win in a deeper way by keeping their peace, dignity, and self-control even when misunderstood. Epictetus once said, "Don't waste time arguing with those who don't seek understanding. They're not listening to grow. They're listening to reply." And it's true. Some people don't want the truth, they want satisfaction. Some arguments aren't about clarity. They're power struggles between wounded egos. So what will you choose? Victory or peace? A former classmate of mine once put it beautifully. "These days I don't feel the need to clap back anymore. I've learned to walk away sooner, because I know now a peaceful mind can't be bought with a loud victory." Dear friend, the older we get, the more we realize people won't remember what you said in an argument, but they will remember how you made them feel. And what the Stoics left behind wasn't fear. It was calm. So the next time someone mocks you, challenges you, or tries to pull you into a war of words, Try this. Take a deep breath, smile, and walk away. Not because you're weak, but because you've grown too strong to need to prove it. Stoic lesson number 9. As you grow, you'll see more clearly who stays for you and who stays for what you give. I once witnessed something painful yet deeply true from my cousin. A kind man devoted to his family, gentle and always responsible. For over 30 years, he never said no. If someone asked, he said yes. If someone needed help, he was there. But eventually, he grew tired. He wasn't as strong as before. He couldn't carry everyone like he used to, and for the first time, he voiced what had been buried for years. I need time for myself. I can't always be the one running ahead. And you know what happened? Some people began to drift away. The calls stopped. The closeness faded. And behind his back, some even whispered, "He's selfish now. He's changed." I still remember sitting with him, his eyes sad but calm. He said, "I realized some people loved me, but only the version of me that always sacrificed, always said yes. When I started being more honest with myself, they didn't like me anymore." Dear friend, this is not uncommon. When you grow, you don't just change, you shift the balance in your relationships. And not everyone will be okay with that. Some people don't love you, they love the role you played in their lives. When that role disappears, so does their affection. The Stoics understood this well. Growth always comes with shedding. What's real will remain. What depends on conditions will fall away once those conditions change. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Be grateful to those who leave, they reveal to you who truly matters." You don't have to hold on to everyone. You don't have to chase after those who only stayed when you lost yourself for them. The older you get, the clearer you see. Who stays when you're tired? Who listens when you have nothing to offer? Who's still there, not for what you give, but simply for who you are? Don't fear losing people. Fear keeping the wrong ones. Keep walking. Keep growing. Keep shining. And let that journey be the mirror that shows you the truth about the relationships around you. Stoic lesson number 10. Why have you changed? Because staying the same would have meant losing myself. At a reunion nearly 30 years after we graduated, an old friend once asked me, "Dung, why are you so different now? You're quieter, more reserved, not the funny guy you used to be." I smiled, took a slow sip of tea, and replied, "Because staying the same would have meant losing myself." Dear friend, I didn't say that to sound enlightened or above anyone. I said it because I've come to understand this simple truth. We cannot keep living inside an old version of ourselves just because others feel comfortable with it. Some people will always remember the you from yesterday, the one who always said yes, who kept the peace by staying silent, who bent over backwards to keep everyone happy. But you can't keep being that person if it means constantly betraying your own voice. The Stoics teach us, change is not unnatural, it's life itself. And maturity is the quiet courage to let the older versions of ourselves dissolve. Have you ever felt this? You begin to set boundaries and they call you selfish. You slow down and they say you've become lazy. You stay silent in the face of nonsense and they say you've turned cold. You stop seeking approval and they label you arrogant. But what no one sees is this. To find the stillness you now carry, you had to weather storms most will never know. To gain your current clarity, you had to be hurt many times for being too soft. And to choose silence now, you had to grow tired of explaining your worth. You didn't change to disappoint anyone. You changed because you could no longer live a life shaped by their expectations. And if you ever need a clear, honest answer when someone asks, "Why are you so different now?" say it gently, say it simply, but say it with the weight of all that you've endured, because staying the same is the slowest way to lose your soul. The Stoics never apologized for growing. They simply kept living with steadiness, with gratitude, and with eyes fixed firmly on what lies ahead. Stoic lesson number 11. Let your silence speak louder than any justification. I once had a student in his 50s named Raymond, a gentleman who had worked in finance for nearly 30 years. He told me that for most of his life, anytime someone misunderstood him, he would rush to explain, sending long emails, making phone calls, clarifying every detail. Once he even wrote a 4-page letter just to prove he meant no harm by a passing comment. Then he chuckled and said, "Strange, isn't it?" The more I explained, the more misunderstood I became. Until one day, I stopped. And I realized, some people don't want to understand, they just want a reason not to like you. Have you ever experienced that? You open your heart only to have it twisted. You speak with sincerity only to be accused of acting. You try to explain only to be met with labels guilty, fake, manipulative. That's when you must learn a lesson the Stoics knew by heart. Not every misunderstanding needs to be resolved. Not every truth must be defended with words. Sometimes, silence is the strongest statement you can make. People often mistake silence for weakness, but silence at the right moment is the highest form of emotional discipline. It doesn't mean you have nothing to say. It means you no longer need to say it. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The essence of what is right does not depend on whether others accept it, but on whether it aligns with your reason and your virtue." So, let them talk. Let the rumors run ahead. Then walk without turning back, without explaining. Because when time reveals the truth, when outcomes expose the falsehoods, your calm, unwavering silence will echo louder than any defense. You don't need to shout in a room full of noise. You only need to keep your conscience clear. In the end, silence is not surrender. It is the chosen voice of those who know what is truly worth speaking for. Stoic lesson number 12. The Stoic does not react. They reflect. Once I sat across from a woman in her 70s, a retired teacher who had lived a quiet, humble life. She didn't speak much, but in her eyes I saw a depth rarely found in the young, the calm of someone who had weathered many storms, without ever needing to retell them. I asked her, "What helps you stay so peaceful?" She replied softly, "I no longer react, I observe." That sentence stayed with me for days, because in a world that rushes to react, to get angry, to strike back, to judge, silence isn't just rare. It's a form of strength few are mature enough to carry. The Stoics understood this. Reaction is instinct. Reflection is intention. Reaction is letting someone else control your inner world. Reflection is seeing things as they are before choosing how to respond. Have you ever regretted reacting too quickly? Saying something harsh in the heat of emotion? Doing something reckless just to prove a point? We've all been there. But Stoicism offers a different path. You don't need to respond to every insult. You don't need to defend yourself with noise. Imagine yourself as a still lake. When someone throws a stone, you don't ripple in anger. You reflect. You don't hold the stone. You don't let it disturb your depths. You simply return the image of the one who threw it. And here's the quiet power in that silence unsettles them. They expect you to rage. They want you to break. They feed off your reaction. But when you offer none, you become a mirror, and they are left to face themselves. Epictetus once wrote, "No one can harm you unless you allow it to enter your mind." So next time you're provoked, attacked, or misunderstood, ask yourself, am I reacting or reflecting? Because true strength is not winning the argument. It's refusing to be pulled down by what's beneath you. Stoic lesson number 13. You don't have to shrink so others can feel big enough. I once sat with a 59-year-old woman, a former executive assistant at a large corporation. She was sharp, dedicated, and capable, yet always made herself smaller. She told me, "I know a lot, but I don't speak up in meetings, afraid they'll think I'm showing off. I do the work, but let others take the credit, worried they'll resent me." I want to share, but I hold back scared I might overshadow someone." Then she sighed and said, "I thought I was being kind. But now I see I've been deeply unfair to myself." Have you ever done the same, dimming your knowledge, hiding your true abilities, suppressing your light just so it wouldn't make others squint? We're taught that humility is a virtue, and it is, but humility doesn't mean erasing yourself. The Stoics didn't boast, but they didn't deny themselves either. There's a thin line between compassion and unnecessary self-sacrifice. You don't have to bow so others can stand tall. You don't have to shrink just to keep others comfortable. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Don't let the noise of others drown out your own inner voice." And I want you to remember this. The light in you is meant to illuminate, not to be hidden. True kindness doesn't come from shrinking. It comes from standing strong so others can find the courage to do the same. If you have to give up your self-respect, your freedom, or your identity just to maintain a relationship, that's not connection. That's captivity. You have the right to walk into a room without apologizing for your presence. You have the right to live at your full size both in talent and in heart. And if your light makes someone uncomfortable, maybe it's not because you're too bright. Maybe it's because they've been sitting in the dark for too long. Stoic lesson number 14. Transform hatred and walk in peace. I once asked an elderly teacher who lived in quiet solitude in the mountains of Colorado, "How do you not feel hurt when you're hated, slandered, or misunderstood?" He smiled. No anger, no pain, just calmness in his voice. "Because I no longer take hatred personally. I see it as a signal that the person is in pain, not because of me, but because of themselves." I've pondered that for years, and with time I've come to understand hatred is often just a form of helplessness. When someone can't control you, can't understand you, can't accept your growth, they begin to resist. Not because you're wrong, but because you no longer make them feel comfortable. Have you ever been disliked simply for living in alignment with your truth? I've known many who have. A 63-year-old man left his corporate job to become a painter, only to be judged by family, distanced by friends. A 55-year-old woman refused to keep playing the role of the self-sacrificing mother, and her children resented her. They were told, "You've changed," but in truth, they had simply returned to themselves. The Stoics never respond to hatred with anger. They don't retaliate. They don't seek to teach someone a lesson. They choose a higher path, transformation, and moving forward. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "When someone behaves wrongly, think of their mistake as a doctor thinks of illness with compassion, not condemnation." Compassion is not weakness. It means you are strong enough not to be pulled into the chaos others create. You understand everyone is fighting a battle you cannot see. And sometimes you are hated not because you are hateful, but because you remind others of the parts they've yet to face. So instead of reacting, reflect. Instead of arguing, walk on. Because true maturity doesn't need to defeat anyone. It only asks that you don't lose yourself in the noise of the world. Stoic lesson number 15. Your growth might make others uncomfortable because it reflects what they haven't faced. One autumn afternoon, I was having coffee with an old friend in his 60s. He used to be easygoing, said yes to everything, went along with the crowd, rarely made waves. But lately he had changed. He lived more intentionally, read more, exercised regularly, even meditated some mornings. And strangely, some of his closest friends began to pull away. He asked me with a heavy heart, "I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just trying to live better. So why are they drifting away?" I looked at him for a long time, then answered truthfully, "Because you're reflecting what they haven't done, and not everyone has the courage to face that." Have you ever seen this happen? You lose weight and they say you've become arrogant. You eat healthy and they mock trying too hard at your age. You set boundaries and they call you cold. You live with discipline and they say you're difficult. But none of those words are really about you. They're about the discomfort they feel when your growth highlights their own stagnation. The Stoics understood this well. Personal growth is never just personal. It quietly sends ripples through everyone around you. You become a mirror, silent, non-judging, but reflective. And not everyone is ready to look into that mirror. Because mirrors don't just show faces, they reveal wounds. They don't just show how far you've come, they remind others how long they've stood still. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Don't be surprised if the path of virtue leaves you walking alone. Most people choose what is easier, not what is better." Dear friend, if you're healing, growing, living with more intention, and finding yourself with fewer friends, fewer compliments, that's not failure. That's a sign you're on the right path. Don't go back just to make others comfortable. Don't shrink just to help someone feel safe. Keep going, because those who truly love you will eventually learn to face the mirror with courage, not resistance. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I don't know who you are, where you live, or what you're going through, but I believe this: if you still have the patience to sit with a lesson about stillness, then within you, there is a deep strength waiting to awaken. Maybe you've been misunderstood. Maybe you've shrunk yourself. Maybe you've sacrificed too much. But starting today, you can choose to live differently. No need for noise, no need for rebellion. Just live true to yourself. As the Stoics once taught, let peace be your answer, and let your presence speak for itself. If something I shared resonated with you, keep walking this path in your own way. And if you know someone who's tired, lost, or overwhelmed, share this video with them. Maybe it will be the first light they see after a long, dark road.